Over the course of the 2010s, you may have heard of a particular gaming skit comedy channel known as The Warp Zone, a wildly popular channel about a decade ago, and they had a meteoric rise to millions of subscribers, 1 billion video views. But it wasn't without its ups and downs. And how are the Warp Zone faring now is another question to answer. So let's take a look at the rise, fall, and immortality of the Warp Zone. So, I guess let's start with who are the Warp Zone. The main 5 members are Michael Schroeder, Michael Adams Davis, usually known as Davis, Ryan Tellers, Brian Fisher, and David Odom. These 5 met in a college film club in 2007, and they started the Warp Zone in 2010, working part-time on YouTube with Maker Studios, along with school, delivery jobs, working as PAs, things like that. They began making silly videos about random games and topics like the Rage Quitter.
Are you fucking kidding me? Dude, you're fucking camping! Yeah, no, you're a fucking camper and a YouTuber. No, fuck you!
Need for Speed needs multiplayer.
You're stupid. I'm not stupid. Give me the controller! No! Turn it on!
No! Or even Food Truck Friday. They also began making parody songs, the very first being The Day Guitar Hero Died, a parody of American Pie in 2011.
Bye bye fake guitar playing guy.
Later on they broadened the songs to include acapellas, the first of which was the Game of Thrones theme, made in 2013. The songs and acapellas continue with some fan favourites like One More Fight, a parody of One More Night by Maroon 5. One Ring, a parody of One Thing by One Direction. And acapellas of famous theme tunes like the Harry Potter, the Flash TV show, and Halo. The rest of their content included skits where they made crude jokes sometimes.
Here we go.
Or even when they broke the fourth wall.
Film a YouTube video.
They got to show their creativity and, frankly, hilarious jokes in many other types of video as well, like Nerf Star Wars, GTA Police, Hogwarts in 2020, and one of my personal favourite types, recap raps. However, despite a very fast rise and a funny, humble start for the Warp Zone, the tides would soon turn, and their lives and their career would change for the worse. Defy Media, or Alloy Digital, as it was called back then, saw the success rising from the Warp Zone and Maker Studios, as they were working part-time as YouTubers, editors, channel analysts, PAs, even food delivery drivers, and some of them still going to school, as I previously mentioned.
We were at Maker Studios, sort of part-timing it. We were doing the YouTube channel, nights, weekends, and during the day, we were working as PAs, editors, channel analysts.
I was going to school, I was delivering food for a food delivery company before there was even Grubhub.
But they always wanted to do YouTube full-time.
At some point we thought, yeah, we don't want to do any of this stuff anymore. We just want to work on Warp Zone.
However, they had no financial way to become full-time YouTubers, as this was before the time of Patreon, Kickstarter. There was no way to self-fund a YouTube channel. So they met with companies and networks that don't even exist nowadays. And then someone from Alloy comes knocking.
A representative from Defy, which was called Alloy then, came to us.
They were offered healthy production budget and high salaries.
We ultimately decided to go with Alloy because they were offering the best salaries and a healthy production budget to grow the channel.
And the offer meant selling the the rights of the Warp Zone to Defy.
To grow the channel.
We would basically sell the rights to the Warp Zone, and we would get, stock in the company, which, it's funny knowing how it ended. But at the time, it seemed really cool that, we had stock. That was very adult.
It was a hard decision that went back and forth for months. They even talked to Smosh about it. Smosh were also, of course, with Alloy at the time. And Smosh seemed happy, and Ian and Anthony seemed happy. So, in 2011, they signed with Defy Media, and it was a good gig for about 3 months. But then, a merger was happening. Without communication to any of their employees, Alloy Digital decided to merge with Break Media to create Defy Media in 2013. This proved to be the beginning of the end for Alloy, or now Defy, and a real sense of lack of belonging and purpose for the Warp Zone.
Almost as soon as that happened, we were not a priority for anyone.
Different people in charge, multiple offices across the country, any face-to-face time highly difficult.
We got different oversight. We got different people in charge of us all of a sudden.
There were multiple offices on multiple sides of the country, and trying to get any visibility or FaceTime was difficult, to put it mildly.
These changes made them feel secondary and only employees to Defy, and this gave them a very poor sense of purpose, a lack of drive, but they still decided to be good employees and continue working to reprove themselves to the new bosses at Defy that they were valuable, which took almost a year. Their smaller position was taken advantage of. There was a big feeling of burnout.
A certain level of burnout and frustration with the company. People, I think, took advantage of our smaller position and our eagerness to please.
And there was a very much a lack of communication. They were told all unprofitable companies, all unprofitable employees were now sold off, fired, and they were lied to. Defy were way more in debt than the Warp Zone were told, and no one really had any idea at Defy that the company was going to fall, except of course the big bosses in charge. But the Warp Zone were never told of this fact, and they describe it as.
And then one day it all came to an end, to a very anticlimactic and surprising stop.
And then, November 6th, 2018, Defy Media fell. Everybody knew something would go down, and eventually it did. Defy decided to let the Warp Zone know by sending out an extremely impersonal email.
The most impersonal ass motherfucking email I've ever read. They use some bullshit excuse like due to unforeseen market conditions.
However, even in these dark times, the Warp Zone still had some hope, as their merch had came in at this time. I have one last night looking at everything. They drank with fellow employees, some employees getting lawyers, some employees, like even their own editor, long-time editor, Chance, had now no income to speak of. It was a very dark time for the Warp Zone, and dark time for other channels like Smosh, and many people, hundreds of employees at Defy. The next day, they lost access to their channel.
Felt like a dream state. I mean, there were people who were furious. There were people calling lawyers immediately. But, I mean, for the most part, everybody was just, taking it all in one last time.
A company that employed hundreds of people, had been such a big part of our lives and our professional careers. It's in an instant just all coming to an end.
But despite this, despite all of it, they wanted it back and they would fight.
Together, we were like, we're gonna fight for this. There is a future. We can't totally see it, but this isn't the end.
We were like,
So, they got in touch with Mythical, also known as Rhett and Link, who managed, after some very impressive maneuvers, to get Warp Zone their channel back, as they did with Smosh, and the Warp Zone were helped by Rhett and Link, and are now, since that happened, are now back in ownership of their channel. Nowadays, the Warp Zone seem to mainly focus on shorts, not uploading a long form video in 9 months, and not getting nearly as many views as a decade prior. Now their last 3 videos only getting around 50,000 views. Whether this is down to stricter rules by YouTube, like demonetization, age restriction, or if it's something to do with the Warp Zone themselves, changing their type of content and going more family friendly, is unclear. The highs and lows of the Warp Zone are clear to see, but one thing is also clear. They are immortal on YouTube, and will never be forgotten. Their unique, hilarious blend of humour and gaming, with their musical talents, created memories for so many people, and they will always be remembered and celebrated as one of the pioneers of 2010's gaming humour on YouTube. They are a perfect example of resilience, talent, and imagination. An example that embodies YouTube, something that is still heavily needed in today's YouTube. Through this exciting, hilarious combo of comedy sketches and music with a gaming background, the Warp Zone amassed over 1 billion video views and 3 million subscribers, and has one of the most iconic intros, in my opinion, in all of YouTube. If the Warp Zone are watching this, you guys are legends, and always will be. You touched the hearts of millions of people, including me as a child. One of my favourite channels to watch. I still go back and watch old videos like some of the acapellas, the Pokemon theme, the Harry Potter theme, Harry Potter on Facebook, Marvel on Tinder, all these incredible videos. And for the rest of you watching, always, always remember,